and I didn't have any business in the beginning, and they were in my office and they said, hey, you can have this client and pay me a 25% referral. And I said, hey, I'll give you a 25% referral for lifetime. But in the end, I told them I'm going to do that. And I just texted them the other day and said, hey, I have this referral for you. And they responded back and were like, hey, thanks so much for being a man of your word and actually doing what you say you're going to do.
It's going above and beyond, making the other person feel like incredible from that interaction with you, that creates that repeat behaviors. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Remington Ramsey, and we are officially a top 5% global podcast nationwide. It's because you listen to it and you like it and you send it to your friends and family and other people that can learn from these amazing guests. Today, my guest is Sam Stone from the Louisville market, young prodigy, made his fortune in real estate off of social media, loves to fish, has a couple kids, and created his own podcast called Risky Business that we're going to dig into. Sam, welcome to the show.
Dude, thank you so much, Remington. Love the show. I've listened to several episodes already and was challenged by that. And also just love what you've done with Real Producers. I want to give a quick shout out to Kelsey Radcliffe in our Louisville market. She does an incredible job of creating events that bring together top producing agents. I remember my first year in the business, somebody told me about Real Producers, and I was like, I want to be in the top 300 so I can get a magazine. And I didn't make it my first year. And I was like, okay, second year I can make it. And I was like checking the rankings because I wanted to get in that elite group. So thanks for what you put together, and shout out to Kelsey for making the Louisville market a fun one where people enjoy it.
Well, just so you guys know, if you were wondering how to start a podcast, flattery is my favorite form of intro.
So that was flattery for Kelsey. That wasn't for you.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
I'm just kidding.
That's great. Yeah, she does a great job out there. Obviously, we're excited to hear about your story and how you grew this. But let's start with this fishing thing. You mentioned that you started a fishing account. That's your main hobby. How does fishing lead to real estate?
Man, I enjoy anything outdoors, anything that gets me outside. And as you know, in the real estate profession, you work all weekend and you work all night. And when you have time that is off, you kind of have to forcefully take time off. And so early on, I kind of realized like, okay, if I don't force myself to take time off, I'm going to run my head through a wall. And so I love to fish and I love to hunt. And so I realized that when I did have time off, especially mornings are slower in real estate, I got really into duck hunting, or I would go fish, or at night times when I was free, I'd go invite some buddies out on my raggedy old 17-foot fishing boat and go out on creeks and rivers in Kentucky and go fish. And I enjoyed it. And then I was like, you know what? I mean, what do people like talking about when they hang out and fish? They like talking about their jobs, what they're doing for work, where they want to move, the next house they're in, the problem with the house they're in there. And so obviously I fish with my friends and it's fun, but it's ended up leading to a lot of conversations about real estate and a lot of clients that I've been able to help, which has been really fun.
So that's the main hook of today's episode, is the ability that you have and what you did on social media to grow your business so quickly. Because if I remember it, you're 4 years into the business.
Yeah, just finished my third year, starting my fourth year.
So hit 20 million in your third year using social media. And in the Midwest, where doing 20 million is a little different than doing it coastally. How many sales was that?
Yeah, that was 50 million or 50 sales last year at 400 average price point.
And when you start these groups, because we've talked in the past about like starting these groups that essentially doing life with people and starting a group that is something that you're passionate about, it's much more authentic to have those conversations with people that are also in those same veins. And you just happen to be at the center of the real estate conversation because you are the expert of the group, but not starting a group about real estate, starting about fishing or other things. Do you have multiple groups, or is it just a fishing group?
Yeah, I mean, it's called a club. It's a relative term, you know what I mean? It's less structured, but and that was kind of my thought on the podcast too, is I was really intrigued with risk and learning as I sat down with people. It was in 2020, sitting down with a bunch of leaders I respected in their fields of figuring out what profession I wanted to go into. I sat down and started talking with people who are successful, and they would just say, hey, here's the risk I took. Here's what it was. When I was 20, I did this, or when I was 25, I saved every penny and reinvested in myself. And I was like, why do all of us as young guys see these people who've been successful, young guys and girls, see these people who've been successful, and we go, I want that. But we don't know their story of how they got there and what they risked or what they gave up to get it. And so I was challenged on, okay, I'd love to start a podcast where I could sit down and hear that story of risk. And in the end, I lose money on every episode. We do a high level production where there's 3 cameras and a producer and all that. But in the end, I'm getting to sit down with people who are leaders in our community and have high influence and high connection, and getting to be obviously real estate comes up on the podcast. And so getting to show myself as a leader in the field that way, which it hasn't paid off a ton yet from the podcast. But in the end, I believe that getting in front of people and showing yourself as the expert can be really helpful.
Well, you mentioned something in the pre-show about not only liking big risk, but doing it early in life. And we are aligned in that. I speak at a lot of schools, and these are juniors and seniors about to go into college or not. And I think one of the best things that we can tell young entrepreneurs, young business owners, is that essentially this is the best time in life, period, to hustle and do the thing and take big risks, because you have the least amount of responsibility that you'll ever have again. Mm-hmm. You're married, you have 2 kids, 30 years old. What were the risks that you took before all that happened?
Yeah, that's good. For me, my personal risk, which is funny, I sit down and ask this question to everybody all the time, but I haven't had it asked to me. So thanks for asking it. For me, my risk was my dad was a pastor. My dad's been a pastor of the church in Louisville here for a long time, and has recently retired, but the church we go to, Southeast. And so I grew up thinking I was going to be a pastor. And that was kind of, I went to school to be a pastor, got pastoral leadership degree. That was kind of the path I was headed down. And as I realized I don't want to work at a church, but I want to do ministry in a different way. And I love real estate. And obviously it's fun to have a freer schedule. And everybody gets into real estate thinking that's a free schedule. And then you realize it's not a free schedule. But yeah.
Hold on. What do you mean by that?
I mean, everybody gets into real estate thinking there's a reel with the sound that goes around that says, I quit my 40-hour-a-week job for freedom. And then I realized I'd work 90 hours a week. You know, when you have one boss, you sit there and go, oh man, I have to pick up that phone call. When every single client is someone you work for, every single client is your possible boss. And so that's the way I look at it, is if you're calling me and I'm working for you and we have an exclusive signed, you're my boss for that whole entire segment. And so, you work when people don't work, because they get off at 5 o'clock most likely, and they're ready to start searching for that house or have their phone calls about the inspection repair request. I was on for 2 hours last night after I put the kids to bed. So yeah, the agents listening know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
Well, so this is why I'm asking you, because you've got your head on straight, son of a pastor, PK. I'm a PK. I don't know if
I didn't know that.
Know that. Yeah.
I did not know that.
And PKs usually turn out so pretty good or just crazy. I think you avoided the crazy one. So like I said, you got your head on straight. You seem like you got your priorities straight. You've got, again, 2 kids and a young marriage. How do you prioritize your family, knowing that the divorce rate in real estate is high, the alcoholism rate in real estate is high? You're on the front end of this, seeing probably a lot of older realtors, 50s, 60s, 70s, that have done the thing and experienced all the things that I'm just talking about. And risk is good to take when you're young, but as you just mentioned, you get out of your 9 to 5, you're working 40 hours a week. How do you prioritize your young family, even though on the front end of real estate is kind of crazy hours, much like most entrepreneurs?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I feel like I'll preface with, I know there's leaps and bounds ways I can grow in this. And I'll preface it with, my wife is really incredible. And she luckily, we're blessed that she can stay home. And I tell people, if she was working a job that was 9 to 5, I don't think I know I couldn't service clients in the same way I can now, because she is very flexible to let me work when I need to, and to know that, okay, it might not be the typical, I get home at 5 o'clock and I hang out with the kids and then I leave at 9 or 8:30 the next morning. But my time can be a little bit different than most. And so I try to guard mornings. I've done, in this season, you're making money when you can and trying to sell houses, because in December and November, you're not selling as much. And so this season I'm trying to be better being home with the kids in the morning and being home with my wife in the morning, because those night times that most people get to sit there and watch a Netflix show with their wife after they put the kids down is usually 3 to 4 nights a week when I'm hammering out some things with some clients or writing an offer up that I didn't get to write that day because I was driving all over town. So I think the thing is to kind of reprioritize your time and be on a schedule that's flexible both sides, that you can kind of invest in that. And I know I could do a better job of it. And if my wife hears this, she'll laugh that I'm that I'm talking about it. But yeah, I know I could do a better job, but she's a true servant, and that's really helpful.
I think you're right. I think the makeup of certain families make it so that one person in the couple can do a different style of occupation if the other one is staying at home with the kids, or their primary actions are in the home. I think it'd be very hard. I've had shows where there are couples in real estate, and that's interesting as well. But I do know that there's a way to do the dynamic where if you prioritize the family first, your clients actually appreciate that, because they are also looking to put their families first. You mentioned in the pre-show that your faith is very important to you, and you believe biblical principles work in the real world. And I think I've heard in the past that the knock on that would be if you read the Bible, it tells you to kind of live a boring life, but you have a perspective that the principles that you can learn in that are really the reason why you found success in real estate. I'm just curious if you can articulate or go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that success in real estate is a weird way to put it. You know what I mean? Because it's everybody has a different level of success, and I look at the guys here that sell more than I do and go, oh man, I'd love to sell what they sell. I'd love to do that. And so I think that in my mind, when it's more back to client services and it's more back to who you are as a person. And I had a guy on my podcast, Roger Short, recently, who's built one of the largest insurance companies in America and has 2,000 agents that work for him. And we got into just a really good conversation on when you structure your business with biblical principles, it stands out in the marketplace more than you want it to.
What would be an example of a biblical principle that makes you stand out in the marketplace?
Treating people the way that you want to be treated, and showing grace and sticking to your word. I had somebody the other day, somebody early on gave me a referral of a client, and I didn't have any business in the beginning, and they were in my office and they said, hey, you can have this client and pay me a 25% referral. And I said, hey, I'll give you a 25% referral for lifetime for this client. And they were like, hey, we don't really do that in real estate. You know what I mean? Just give me the one time and you'll be fine. And I was like, no, thanks for doing it. I want to earn more referrals. And this last week, those people had bought their 4th house, and they were actually buying it for their parents. And so I'm sitting there going, okay, they're buying it for their parents, but technically they're the ones buying it. I don't have to call this other agent and give them the referral. But in the end, I told them I'm going to do that. And I just texted them the other day and said, hey, I have this referral for you. And they responded back and were like, hey, thanks so much for being a man of your word and actually doing what you say you're going to do. Because they realized I kind of could have just kept an extra 25% of it and done it. But in the end, I mean, I feel like God blesses it in a different way. And I don't know. It's, to me, faith
not
is
only
important.
not only that, so I agree with you on biblical principles, doing the right thing and how it actually comes back to you. But if you just think about that example you just gave, I think what most people, I don't know about most, but what some people don't realize is that if you start consistently doing that, rewarding people for behavior, regardless of if it's technically, something that you should give a referral fee on. If you're just the guy that constantly loves on people by going, it's that Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. That was my favorite book of last year. It's going above and beyond, making the other person feel incredible from that interaction with you, that creates that repeat behavior. So if you start taking that action, with everyone you come in contact with, that will become your persona, and people will attract people. They'll want to be a part of that. So you're rewarding the behavior instead of the results, right? And I know there's like commission things in real estate where you can't just pay people just to give you leads if they don't close and all that kind of stuff. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, if you start rewarding behavior and not the results, it's going to come back to you. And I think that is foundationally found in Scripture.
And I think one thing, this is a little bit of an offshoot, but I think it's important to chat through with people listening to your podcast. And I say this knowing I'm 4 years into the business. So there's people who listen to your podcast who've sold way more than me and know way more than me. But in my eyesight, when I got into real estate, I was watching Selling Sunset in COVID in 2020. I'm like, gosh, that must be really easy. And in the end, I think that, or in the beginning, I think agents see other agents as the competition or as somebody they shouldn't like. And I kind of went into it with, hey, biblical principles are you love your neighbor and you love your enemy. Not that other agents are your enemy, obviously, but you love the people who might not be your biggest fan. And so I think that the one of the lowest hanging fruits to do well in real estate is to love on other agents well, and not do it in a fake way, and not do it in a way that's like, oh, I'm just trying to kiss up to try to get a deal later with them. But if you truly love them well, I mean, they're the people that are going to be pushing for your offer to be accepted. And I think that anecdotally, I've seen story after story of, writing a handwritten note to an agent that a deal went hard or went bad or ended up in a termination, or offering a gift to somebody. If an agent goes above and beyond, I try to give something to them that stands out. And it's wild how other people in the offices around town have like reached out to me and be like, oh, they told me about that thing you did for them. And I'm like, it cost me $10 or it cost me 10 minutes of my time.
Yeah.
But it's wild how far it goes. And in the end, we all just want to be loved and cared for, you know what I mean? And so when you can offer that to other people,
I'll take it a step further, Sam. I'll tell you who really gets the shaft is the vendors.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, if you think about the dynamic of and it's not true about everybody. In fact, most people on the show, I'd say the reason why they found success and have made it to our show, which is the top 1% of realtors, is because they don't do this. But if you're listening to this and you feel like your time is more important than a vendor's calling on you. Now, there's certain vendors I understand that will abuse this, and they will, for whatever reason, not necessarily be the best at calling on somebody. But if you have a vendor who's literally just calling or reaching out or emailing, and you decide that because they're calling on you, you don't have to respond, that's just not going to come back tenfold to you, like what we're talking about, like treating everyone with that love and respect, like regardless of who they are in the relationship. But you're right about the other agent. I mean, I think it's crazy that agents will fight hard for their client and kind of ruin the relationship with the agent on the other end of the table at the closing deal, when in reality, the likelihood that they'll work with that agent is way higher than even a second home sold to that client. So if you're just thinking smartly about this, it doesn't make sense sometimes the way we treat the other people.
Yeah, and I think you can service both well. I don't like in the end, like obviously I want to serve that client again, but in the end, you can have your client's best interest in mind, and you can deliver hard news with in a way that's not demeaning to the other person or degrading to them. And I think that there's ways to walk a fine line with that. And yeah, it's been pretty cool. I've enjoyed it so far, and hoping to help out a lot more people and service a lot of others.
So we opened with social media and how you grew your business on specifically using, I'm assuming Facebook was what you're talking about with the groups earlier. What are the social media platforms that you focus on, and what are some very practical tips that if I'm listening to this and I wanted to start a real estate business tomorrow, what do I do?
Yeah. Instagram's the main one. Obviously I just share everything to Facebook off of it. But in the end, I think that one of the coolest things is, you said you read Ninja Selling. If you haven't read Ninja Selling and you're in real estate, just turn off the podcast right now, pause it, go listen to it for 8 hours, and then come back and finish this episode. It is an incredible book that will challenge you to say, hey, there's always going to be somebody that's going to spend more in marketing than me. There's always going to be somebody that's going to be bigger than me. But in the end, the people that know and trust me are going to use me. And if I can invest in those relationships, then the more people will know and trust me and will end up using me. So I read that book, And one of the main things it talks about is flow and saying, hey, how are you staying in flow with people? And so as I started to look at scalability in a business, I can have 5 lunches a week if I'm eating lunches with somebody every day. If I'm getting coffee with somebody every day, I can have 5 coffees a week and 5 lunches a week. There's 10 people I can have true conversation with. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, how can I scale a business? For me, if I have 50 followers on Instagram or if I have 50,000 followers on Instagram, it takes me the same amount of time to produce content, make videos, make interesting value adding content. And so I started just pouring in. Actually, I made my Instagram account before I got my license about a year before. And I just called it Louisville KY Real Estate. And I just started posting cool houses on Instagram every day. For a year straight, I posted pretty much 3 or 4 or 5 houses a week. Wow. And it started
building. You were getting your license?
Yeah. Wow. And so I had built, when I switched over to getting my license, I had 2,500 followers on the account. And that doesn't sound like a ton, but when they're all Louisville based, because they all want to see houses in Louisville.
Yeah.
It was half the real estate.
Yeah. Imagine having 2,500 unique profiles on your CRM. That's the way to look at it, not followers, because we get kind of tainted on like what the follower account is. But if you had 2,500 people into your CRM, that's after a year.
And it was people who were truly interested in, they might've been agents, but they were truly interested in the Louisville market. And so when I look back, I switched it over, made it, hey, this is Sam Stone Realtor, Louisville KY Real Estate, then just started posting stuff early on in real estate. I think it sped up the ability of success earlier because the name was almost more known in real estate because people had kind of been like, oh, I've been following that account for a year. And I wasn't the new guy who'd never sold anything. I was the guy who, you know what I mean, posted cool houses on Instagram. And so I think that helped me out a bunch. And then it was kind of a springboard to where, you know what I mean? It's dumb, but how do we check people's validity today as we go on Instagram? When I heard I was doing a podcast with you and Kelsey connected us, I went straight to Instagram and just looked up your profile and read your bio, you know, and saw your top 3 pinned posts. And so, yeah, and you have a lot of views on them. So I'm thinking, oh, Remington must be a cool guy who's built something cool, obviously. And so I think that if we can say, okay, how can I build something that I can connect with people and I can add value? I think that's the hard thing. Everybody just wants to show the cool trip they're on or the cool real estate lifestyle or the cool one house that they're selling, but they don't want to show other people's stuff. I'm like,
man, you just touched on something really important though.
I was on a roll, so I'm glad you cut me off because I didn't know where I was going with that.
How do you create something out of nothing? How do you say, I'm good at this before you've actually done it? How do you sell the first one with no experience, right? Having proximity experience is better than not. So if you know you're getting your real estate license, starting an Instagram and just posting houses, you're not lying. You're not saying I'm a realtor. You're not showing people that you're good at this thing. You're just showing a passion for something that you are then going to get into and actually monetize. I think there's a huge lesson there. I think that this craze of people wanting to become entrepreneurs and just not ever doing the thing, but they don't want to work for the man. They don't want to work for the 9 to 5. So then they get into whatever entrepreneurship, but not even real estate, just whatever, but they don't have the experience. And then they just end up living in their parents' basements for a little bit longer, waiting to get famous on YouTube. Whereas you knew you were going to get into it. You started posting houses every single day before you got into it, so that when you did get into it, you're already known as the guy that's passionate about this. I got so passionate about it. Now I want to make money from it and start a business and help you guys be passionate about it too. That is huge. And that's much deeper than just posting houses.
And I want to, the other thing is it was a slow, consistent build. It wasn't like it took a long time and people are like, oh my gosh, how do you have so many? Every week it's 2 to 3 people who are reaching out via Instagram message saying, hey, we want to look at a house, or hey, we want to start a search. And it's kind of in a market to where leads cost a whole lot. If you want to go to Zillow and start buying leads, it's going to cost a whole lot of money. I've kind of created my own lead source and I just have to feed it with my time. And I think one thing that I was going to hit on was just the fact of now when I go to listing appointments and we're in a market to where it's a whole lot harder to sell houses than it was in 2021 when I first got my license, when it listed and it was gone. And so when I go to listing appointments and I sit down and say, here's the social media platform I built. I listed a neighbor's house not long ago and made a made a cool video for it, and there's 10,000 views on it, and they're all localized views. That's the plus thing is, yes, you can go get a video with 1 million views on Instagram, but they're all over the place. But I can see the people who watch it are 70, 80% Louisville based people. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if I can get 10,000 people to see this, I asked ChatGPT the other day. Instagram obviously gives you the analytics of how many people see your account a month. And last month it was 139,000 people. So I just said, hey, ChatGPT, make me a picture of 139,000 people. And it made me a big stadium. And I posted it on social media, and I'll take it to a listing appointment and say, this is how many people. Every other agent puts it on Flex. Every other agent does that. This is how many people on social media alone last month that I individually touched with my account.
That's amazing.
I know there's other agents who do great on social media, obviously, but I know that apples to apples versus the other guy you're interviewing, I can get your house in front of more people, and I believe more eyeballs sells more houses for more money. So
it's phenomenal, Sam. And I love that last tip about ChatGPT, because I feel like there's so many things that we can use that for versus just writing a listing script on it. And maybe we'll have you back on and you can give us your best ChatGPT hacks. Is there anything that you want to leave this group of listeners with hope? We've got 1 minute because apparently my Zoom account expired and I got to change the card.
Dude, you're A-okay. It's good to cut me off. Mine would be figure out what your next risk is. In real estate, people probably took a risk to jump into it, but figure out what your next risk is. Somebody on my podcast recently said the biggest risk you can take is not taking a risk. And so figure out what your next risk is. I'd love for you to come in and listen to the Risky Business podcast. It's on Spotify and YouTube. And I love pouring into people that way and challenging people to take the next risk in their life. So
it's fantastic, man. You definitely are the what is possible if you take risks. Great picture of that. Sam Stone, Louisville Market. That's all we got time for. If you want to influence who we have on the show or what we talk about, email us at podcast@realproducersmag.com. We'll see you next time.